Hey everyone, somebody had asked me on the forum about the peening that I was talking about on the pin. Well, I just happen to have another carrier here and I haven't touched it. I just took it out of the case. So what you're seeing, let me get a pointer. Right there at the tip of that, you can see where it's been hit with a punch. Now this is what the factory has done, and you can see the pin is right there, and then on the other side there's another punch mark, and basically what it does is it shoves the metal in over top of this pin so the pin can't back out. So here's what I do to get the pin out. The easiest way I found is to first take pin punch and knock that pin in a little bit deeper, and it'll go in quite a bit more. It'll actually, it can't go through the other side, it'll bottom out. So what I do is I drive it in a little further, and then I take a 5/32 drill bit, and this is going to be in the installation manual for the Torq-locker. I take a 5/32 drill bit, and once that pin's knocked in, all I do is just take the drill bit and go boop a little bit, just to knock the edges off where it's been peened in. You don't want to make the hole bigger because it would just be too hard to, you'd have to beat the crap out of it to peen the edges back over. Basically all you're going to do is just knock the very edges of that peening off, and then the pin will drive out from the other side pretty easily. So I'm going to go ahead and knock this pin down a little bit. It's going to take two hands, so I'm going to set the camera down for a minute and I'll pick it up. I'll show you how far I drove the pin in, and then I'll take the drill and knock the edges off, and then we'll drive it out from the other side. But I'll get it all on video this time because I did not cover that. Well, I didn't show exactly what I did, so hopefully this will help a lot. Right back. One other thing I forgot to mention before I do this is the hammer I'm using. Don't use a great big heavy hammer. Use an actually quite a small hammer. And what the small hammer does, you can see this compared to my hand, it's a pretty small hammer. I don't know if it has a weight on it, but just to give you an idea, don't use some 5-pound hammer or even this big heavy brass hammer. A light hammer, it gives it a nice sharp blow. You don't have to hit it hard, and it'll tap the pin in. It won't crush anything. It just works better with a light hammer. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and I'll be right back. Alright, so now you can see I drove the pin in. It's in, about 1/8 of an inch, maybe not even that deep, but I give it a good smack, and because I wanted to see how far it would go. That's as far as it would go. I could actually feel it bottom on the other side. So now it's out of the way. Now I'll take my drill bit, and actually I'll set up the drill and do that and show you what I'm going to do with the drill. So 1 second. Alright, so I'm ready with the drill. Like I said, I'm using a 5/32 drill bit on my drill, in my drill, and all I'm going to do is just give that one quick spin and wiggle it around just a little bit. Done. That's all you have to do. And all it did was just remove a little bit of the peening above the pin. I'll blow it out with some air, and now when I flip the carrier over, I can drive that pin out. It just makes it so much easier instead of trying to bash it through that peening. So I'll knock the pin out, and I'll show you guys with the pin out, and then I'll put the pin back in and re-peen that with a center punch. So it's really a simple operation, nothing to be worried about. Right back. Alright, so we're back. I flipped the carrier over. It's upside down now. Here's my pin punch, and here's the hole that you drive out the pin from this side. And the problem I've run into is that my pin punch is too short. So I have to, last time I just used a piece of, it was actually a long nail that I just cut off the sharp tip. I ground it off and finished driving it through. But use the punch first, because the punch is real hard, and it'll get the pin moved out and as far as it'll go, and then it drives out easily with, like, you know, a piece of nail, a piece of rod, anything, just to finish tapping it all the way out. The pin punch I've got, it just isn't long enough. And actually I went on the Snap-on truck and tried to get longer ones. Nope, they didn't have them. So this is what I'm stuck with, and most likely you will be too. But like I said, just a nail, anything roughly the diameter of the pin, a little bit smaller. Once you drive it through with this as far as it'll go, then it just knocks right out. You could even use that, like my little screwdriver here. That will probably knock it the rest of the way out. And actually I'll give it a try. But like I say, once you've driven it as far as this pin punch will go, unless you're lucky enough to have a longer one, it goes pretty easily. So I'll go ahead and bang this out, and I don't know, I'm not going to try and do this one-handed. I'll probably have the whole thing on my foot or something. But I'll set this down and be right back. Alright, so I've driven it through as far as it'll go. You can see it's starting to get close to the taper in the pin. Don't do like I did the first time and hit it hard when it's getting down there, because that damn pin punch gets stuck in the hole and you got to wiggle it out with vice grips. So anyways, gently. Once it starts to move, it moves pretty easily. See, it's sticking out the bottom now. So now just pull that out. I'll actually use my little screwdriver and finish tapping that's it. Like I say, there's only a tiny little bit, and there's the pin right there. There's the pin. So once that pin's out, you can just push the cross pin straight out. Spider gears, side gears, all that stuff falls out. But and we've already seen all that. I showed all you guys that. But like I said, somebody had asked about the pin and the peening and getting the pin out. So there it is. The pin's out. And now I'll flip it over and we'll put it back in. So let me just pause this again for a second. I'll turn it over. Alright, so I've got my center punch. The center punch is basically, I'm sure I'm preaching to the choir, you guys know. It's basically a pin punch with a sharpened end on it. And if you don't have a pin punch, or a center punch, sorry, and you've got an old pin punch or an old punch you don't mind sacrificing or putting a sharp end on, it's super easy to do. You just take this punch and chuck it up in a drill, and if you got a grinder, just go over to the grinder and spin the punch with the drill and put the grinder up against the grinding wheel and spin it with the drill, and it makes a perfectly centered, perfectly sharp end on it. So anyways, I'll use this to peen it over when I drive the pin back in. So I'll go ahead and tap the pin back in, and then I'll show you the peening process, which is, well, it's simple. So I'll show it to you in a second. I'm just going to go ahead and drive the pin in and be right back. Right, before I finish driving this pin, now I've started the pin, and I actually used my little ball peen hammer to get it started. Don't get in a rush doing this. Get the pin centered and lightly tap it with the hammer, because you don't want to get the thing trying to drive it in at a bad angle or get it cocked. You'll end up galling it up, and probably could end up being a nightmare trying to get the rest of the way in. What I'm going to use to finish driving it in is I'll use this little hammer, and actually I've got a brass drift that a brass punch that will not damage the end of the pin, which I got to tell you, this pin is some kind of hard, so it probably wouldn't damage it anyways. But if I go ahead and start hitting it hard with this little hammer. First of all, I might miss and hit that thrust washer surface. Don't want to do that. So really I want to get away, you know, get up here and get away from the work and use a brass drift, because the other thing that can happen when you're hitting a really hardened piece of steel like this pin with a really hardened steel hammer is that the pin might chip, and the little pieces can leave at pretty high velocity. So it's just something to be, you know, just something to think about. Definitely wear eye protection when you're doing this, and otherwise, like I said, it's a very straightforward job. I take this for granted. I've been doing it for so long, I forget these little details, and so I'm trying to do this in a detailed manner for y'all. I'm just going to grab my brass drift and I'll be right back. Alright, so here's what I'm talking about. It's just basically a big heavy punch, but it's made of bronze or brass or, you know, that type of metal, and it's soft enough to where it won't cause that to chip. So what I'll do is I'll drive it down flush, and then I'll finish driving it the rest of the way in with my pin punch again. And so I'll finish driving it in with the pin punch once I get it down flush with the surface of the carrier. So hold on one second. Changed my mind. I went ahead and set up the camera so you can actually see what I'm doing here. Hopefully this thing doesn't fall over while I'm beating on it. Anyway, so now you can see the pin going in, and like I said, it doesn't take much. A small little hammer gives it nice sharp blows, not heavy blows but sharp blows. So I'll try and get my hand out of the way so you can see. Sorry, I apologize for that. So anyways, there it is. The pin's almost flush with the surface. I'll just give it one more smack with the brass drift. It'll be flush with the surface, and then I will then I'm gonna, you know, drive it below the surface with the pin punch, and then we'll do the peening. So hold on one second and I'll set this camera down again. Hopefully it stays put. Alright, so let's finish this up. One more smack. Alright, so it's almost pretty much flush with the surface. Take the pin punch carefully. Get it centered on the pin and just give it a nice light tap. And just keep doing that. Center it, tap. Center it. Once it's in the hole, then you can just finish driving it down a little more, a little bit below the surface. I'm going to go a little deeper than where the factory had it, just a little bit. That's that. Now you can see where I've got it. It's a little below the surface. You can still see the two punch marks where the factory peened it in, and it looks like they use the same thing as center punch. On my machine, when I had my carrier out, this is a different carrier. It's still a P500 carrier, but they had actually peened it over far more aggressively. So this one's not too bad. So anyways, now I've got it, you know, I've got the pin in. Now I need to peen the metal over so that the pin can't back itself out. I doubt it could anyways, but better safe than sorry. So I'm going to take my center punch, and I'm not going to hit it where the factory did. I'm going to go a little beside that, close to the edge. So what it's going to do when I hit this, it's going to push the metal over into the hole. And like I said, it doesn't take much. Just a light smack, a couple of marks, and it's done. You don't have to beat the crap out of this. You don't want to do that, because if you decide to take the thing apart again, you're not going to have much metal left. So I'll just go ahead and give that a light smack, and I'll set the camera down again so you can see. And that. Camera set. So again, I got my center punch. I'm going to get the sharp point just near the edge, probably back about a 16th of an inch, and then I'm just going to give it one of those, and that's it. And I'm going to go over to the other side, and I'm going to do the same thing. And like I said, all it does is push the metal, distorts the hole at the top so that the pin can't come out. Just boom. Sorry about that phone. So that's that, and I'll show you that. So there, you can see the new punch marks, and it just very slightly squeezes the hole shut. I don't even know you can tell on the camera, but you can see the edge is knocked in just a little bit. That's all it takes, and then the pin can't come back out. That's it. That's peening over the hole to retain the pin. And I think that's it for that one. Yeah, that's it. So that's the whole thing in a nutshell. Thanks for watching, everybody.